Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon, depending on where you are. I want to thank everyone for joining us, all of our colleague mayors and all of our distinguished guests. I'm Columbia, South Carolina Mayor Steve Benjamin. I have the distinct pleasure of serving as the host today, the moderator for ensuring digital equities for Black communities. This wonderful conversation is being sponsored by our friends at Comcast. I want to personally thank Tony Williams and the whole team at Comcast. They've been there side by side, arm in arm with the African American Mayors Association from our very beginning. So thank you for sponsoring this conversation. In our conversation today, we're going to discuss the National Urban League's Lewis Latimer Plan for Digital Equity and Inclusion and the importance of Black mayors' voices to ensure that all communities benefit from the broadband components in Congress's infrastructure bill. Joining us today, we have Edward Smitty Smith, the managing partner at DLA Piper in Washington, D.C., and senior director of the Lewis Latimer Plan for Digital Equity and Inclusion. And we also have Joy Chaney. Joy serves as executive director of the Washington Bureau and senior vice president for policy and advocacy at the National Urban League. I'm not going to read the entire bios because they take up the whole hour, but it's easy to say we have two amazingly distinguished, still very young professionals who are blazing a trail. Edward Smitty Smith is one of the leaders of DLA Piper's global telecom practice, advising clients on telecom matters and across the U.S. and across more than 50 countries. Served recently as a telecom subject matter expert for the Biden-Harris transition FCC agency review team, and obviously I mentioned the key role he's played in helping develop the league's Lewis Latimer Digital Equity Plan. He's had a wonderful career at both the FCC and Department of Commerce, and is considered to be an amazing leader in this field. We're so happy, Smitty, that you decided to spend some time with us today. Joy Chaney, blazing her own trail, domestic legal policy expert, political strategist, former chief of staff to U.S. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand of New York State. After leaving the Senate, she relaunched Joy, J-O-I Strategies, a consulting firm that develops strategies for organizations and companies seeking to achieve justice, opportunity, and inclusion in America's underserved communities, beginning with women and persons of color. A long career for a very young woman, I might add, but I'll leave that alone. But senior roles in the Obama administration, senior advisor to the chair of the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, leadership roles at Planned Parenthood Federation of America, and the list goes on and on. Graduate of Howard University and Harvard Law School. Just really impressive team as I read through your bios. He was an old man, sees gray hairs. I don't know what you got there, Smitty. You bald. You might be hiding something, but he was an old man, a lot of pride as I read through your bios. But last month, the National Urban League unveiled a really exciting and comprehensive agenda for leveraging tools in the information economy to create a more equitable and inclusive society. You call this plan the Lewis Latimer Plan for Digital Equity and Inclusion. Why don't we maybe start off talking a little bit about who Lewis Latimer was, and then how does the plan create a framework for digital equity? And I'll kick it to you all. I'm not sure who goes first. Brother Smith, you're leading on this, and so I'll let you go first, and then Joy.
I almost always defer to Joy. So.
I was trying not to do ladies first because I'm not getting in trouble. I'm in a house full of women right now, so I try to make sure I watch up. So, Joy, why don't you go first?
Well, let me just say, Smitty and I have known each other for a very long time. We were in law school together, and I can assure you that we are older than we look. However, he's at least smart enough to not have hair on his head, and therefore you can't see the grays. First of all, I'm glad to be here with you. I bring you greetings on behalf of Mr. Mayor Mark Morial. He's sorry he can't be here because this is his crew. I will let Smitty give the background on Lewis Latimer, because the one thing I don't think you had a chance to mention was that he was the executive director of our Lewis Latimer project, and that predated my joining the Bureau. And I frankly think he's done an extraordinary job. So I want to defer to him. and thank him again for his hard work on the project. And we look forward to talking to you about it today. But Smitty, why don't you tell them what was the inspiration for Latimer?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Joy.
Yeah.
And Joy and I go way, way back, so we always like to joke. Well, and thank you, Mayor Benjamin. It's a real honor because not many people know this, but before my family moved to DC, we all came up from Columbia, South Carolina. So my family are Columbia natives. But to tell you a little bit more about Lewis Latimer. He was a Black draftsman, a soldier. He was a scientist. He was one of the giants of industry around the turn of the 20th century, who was overlooked in our history books, as are so many African-American giants of industry. But he was the man behind putting together the patent for Alexander Graham Bell's telephone. He worked closely with Thomas Edison. He was responsible for electrification of some of our major urban centers back then. He helped electrify and run electrical wiring throughout New York, Philadelphia, Montreal, London. So he is one of those unsung heroes. And we thought that it was appropriate, given the role that he played in that industrial revolution, to honor his contribution in talking about this current industrial revolution and the impact of broadband and internet today, and particularly with respect to communities of color and African-American communities. And what brought the Latimer plan to the fore, what was sort of its reason for being, was a recognition on the part of the Urban League of the importance of broadband connectivity today for communities of color, and where that falls in terms of the digital divide, how many communities are still unconnected today, the impacts that have on our everyday lives, as particularly catalyzed and exacerbated by some of the challenges and crises that we see today. Those crises principally being the COVID-19 public health crisis, the economic crisis that's spawned off from the COVID-19 crisis that has impacted the haves and the have-nots in drastically different ways. The social justice crisis exemplified by the murder of George Floyd and countless others more every day. And the political crisis that we saw around the 2020 election in the last 4 years, frankly. And so, the confluence of those challenges compound what was an existing and long-lasting problem with the digital divide that had handicapped communities of color and prevented us from participating fully in today's economy and society. And so this was an effort to bring together some of the brightest minds in telecom policy and technology policy around this core social issue to provide solutions and to help bring together public and private partnerships to finally close the digital divide, something that has really been an impediment for many Americans, not just communities of color and low-income communities, but many Americans for the last 3 decades. So this is a really bold project to put together sustainable and comprehensive recommendations, and that's what you have with the plan. And looking forward to talking to you about what we propose.
And let me just add one thing on Latimer is that, as important as he was, he did not reap the economic benefits that his bosses did. And so one of the reasons we named it after him is also one of the reasons we included one of the biggest sections in our plan, and that's on closing the business opportunity gap. One of the things the Latimer plan covers is, at the end of the day, we want broadband, but not just that. We want board roles, and we want supply chain contracts, and we want jobs for African Americans and other people of color. We want to make sure that, unlike Latimer, that they are able to reap the economic benefits of this current boom.
No, fantastic. No, and I appreciate the collective framing. It's right on point. I mean, we're talking about 1918, 1932, and 1968 all wrapped up into 1 year. Someone laid it out as almost an X-ray of American society that shows so many broken bones at one time. And how, in fact, and I really am thankful for the work of the Urban League in this space, because these conversations, though obviously accelerated, are not new for the Urban League. I mean, you've been very active in trying to frame And now we have a wonderful sense of urgency and also some capital coming into the space to help fuel some things. So we're going to talk about deployment and adoption in a moment. But what you just said about economic access and economic opportunity and how that was denied, Louis Latimer. I'd love for you to just talk a little bit more about the role that that technology can play in access to the online economy that employs a diverse workforce and what that could mean for greater business opportunities for communities of color. I know this is something that's been central to the National Urban League and its work around diversity and equity and inclusion. And more importantly, if you can tie it into what we as mayors and maybe working with the Biden administration can do to make these opportunities more real.
Well, I'll go ahead and start since Smitty covered the last question. For us, it's important to acknowledge that, while there is an ability to go in and I guess do things via phone or go in physically or what, no one does work like that. And we should not be expecting our businesses and our even just regular people, right? Whether they're applying for a job or whether they're applying for a business loan, to operate in that type of economy. When's the last time you ever had to go in physically, stand in line, and do that work? It's just something that you don't do. If you are a single parent, where would you get the childcare to do something like that? How would you do it if you were trying to transition from one job to another? It is vitally important that you have access to broadband, and not just via your phone. Although phones are getting fancier and fancier, you can't do everything via your phone. And so we want to acknowledge that. The other, and I would say that the other thing ties into also what mayors can do. One, like the president, on the first day in office, they created a racial justice executive order that asked all agencies to take a look at how they were doing their business and how government benefits were available. And we, at the National Urban League, and I think I speak for Smitty as well, believe this is also an opening for us to say we have to make sure everyone can use online services in order to access government benefits. And then in order to truly be equitable, then we have to ensure everyone has access to broadband in the home. So that they can access these benefits, and so we're definitely making that as a hook. That is a promise made, and we expect it to be a promise kept. I think that as we look at the money that is flowing to states and localities, it's never enough, but it certainly is a lot. We have to make sure that as that is deployed and making sure that mayors get that money, right? So not just states, but mayors get that money, that you all are doing that same kind of equity analysis. And not just the wonderful mayors here on this call, but mayors all over the country, regardless of party affiliation, that you're doing that analysis and you're saying, how are we making sure everyone can utilize our benefits, our services, that we are closing the gap of people being able to access. And the other thing we'd want to do, and we talk about this in the plan, is make sure people how to use the services. I'm sure many of you had to help your parents or your aunties get online to get their COVID vaccination. And even for those who would think of themselves as technologically savvy, even just the difference of a system can be can be a hindrance. So making sure that we're actually training people to get online. And then I know we're going to talk about affordability later, but Smitty, just anything else I think on that?
No, these are all excellent points, Joe. Thank you. And yeah, I think to a few of those, to this question of the original question about access and access to business opportunities that you mentioned, Mr. Mayor. We challenge in the plan that the federal government go ahead and include in any infrastructure legislation that any companies that are going to benefit from stimulus for broadband deployment or broadband programs, that they are also, including within their actions, an attention to, to digital equity and inclusion, and making sure that they're offering opportunities in an equitable basis to their subcontractors, to suppliers, that they're advancing supplier diversity. These are similar things that mayors can be doing as well at the municipality level, which is, to the extent that you're receiving stimulus payments to do broadband deployment, to the extent that you're part of that ecosystem, to be making sure that the private companies that are coming in and doing it for you are doing so in a way that's creating business opportunities for communities of color. And we think that, you guys at the mayoral level are at the front lines of these battles. And every time, we come across this question of, what needs to be done in order to make sure that broadband is being deployed in our cities, to make sure that people have access to it in our cities, to make sure people can afford it in our cities. The same question comes up, which is, what are we doing at the community level? What are we doing to make sure that we're getting input and feedback from the community level on the ground, so that we can make sure these dollars are being used in the proper way? And one of the ways that these dollars need to be used is in a way that is creating equity, not just in the consumption of broadband, but also in the business opportunity element. We have a lot of recommendations in the plan for making sure that we're doing the right kind of data collection, so that the next time around when when the dollars have to go out, if it's not collected, if it's not recorded, if we're not tracking it, then it's not getting done. So we need to make sure that we're coordinating with folks at the municipality level on actually tracking how the dollars are being spent. We've got a lot of recommendations about how to incentivize better use of this money, and I think mayors have to be a key part of that. Thank you.
No, the only other thing I would add is, I mean, we're thrilled that the administration seems to be thinking along these lines as well. If you take a look at the proposal that has been put forward, and even some of the ones that are matching it on the House side, there's a lot of public commitment and lip service being given to needing to give back to Black and Brown owned businesses and suppliers, both on the business loan side, but also just making sure that the dollars are going to those companies. But we want to make sure that happens. And I think that, we have a public commitment. We will be holding people accountable. But to Smitty's point, we have to have tracking of those dollars so that we see how they, happen going out the door. And also making sure that we're lowering the barrier to people actually accessing them. Because my greatest fear is that they'll put it out there, people won't, sort of find their way to it, and then that's an excuse that the program doesn't work. And we want to make sure that does not happen.
No, absolutely. And I know that the National Urban League's been doing a lot of work in that space. I heard so much in what both of you just shared. But, our friend Senator Booker is always fond of quoting Deming, that in God we trust, everyone else bring me data. We manage what we measure. And if in fact you set some very clear goals for everyone to meet, and you incentivize them, or whether with positive or negative incentives,
carrot or stick, we'll take either one.
People will make it there, but you got to manage it and measure it, so this data can be used, and you can humanize the data. And I also agree, mayors and sit at the center of some significant gross metropolitan economies. I mean, regardless of the city or town that you may lead, that your vendors should reflect the values of your city. So the people that you do business with and the contracts that you execute with them should be reflective of your values. If you're a city that believes in equity and inclusion and second chances, or whatever it looks like, then that ought to be inculcated in your contracts. And it was important. You talked about the opportunity, Joy, of making sure people can access these opportunities. This session is sponsored by Comcast, NBC Universal, and it also supports National Urban League's Urban Jobs Program, which trains and places long-term unemployed Americans into entry-level IT positions. I think what a whole lot of folks, obviously dealing with the major issues we're dealing with today, is that we forget that the normal before the pandemic wasn't great. That as we were ready for the future of work, we saw several of our family members and friends particularly those tapped in the two bottom quintiles of American society, not participating in the American economy, and the future of work was looking very grave and dim for them already. Now, as we have this K-shaped recovery into the new normal, a whole lot of folks are left that much farther behind. That's why work really to get people into these entry level IT positions so they can participate in the 21st century economy is so key. Any thoughts based on your work with Comcast?
Yes. So
what more we can do in our regions to help people connect with jobs?
absolutely. So I don't know if it has been fully announced. So let me go ahead and do it here. We put it out in April. First of all, Tony is family at this point. Thank you to him. I know he supported this effort as well. We're just so thankful, to announce this collaboration that we had with Comcast that is really not just about the pandemic, right? I'm so glad that you said that, Mayor Steve, because the truth is these issues existed before. So Comcast has made a sizable commitment, $3 million investment to train workers, and I think about 6 cities throughout in the Urban League network: Chicago, Houston, Broward County, Greater Atlanta, Greater Pittsburgh, and Philadelphia. So some of the most diverse and some of the largest. Hope maybe some of those there's some representation, really some of those places perhaps on the call today. And we're aiming to make sure a couple hundred, I think maybe about 250 or so folks can go through this program, and on the other side can have not only training but actual jobs. And an interesting part is, Tony and I have talked about it before, but these are jobs that are great for folks from a range of backgrounds, whether or not they have college degrees, whether or not they have a criminal record. These are jobs that they can do from within their homes, or if they're driving a long haul trucking, as I know there was an example in Chicago. So traditional jobs that we would think of for these populations, but they're highly technical, and without technical skills, they would not be able to have those jobs. Jobs that once before were seen as not technical now are run by computers. And so the jobs that people thought they could access, they can't. We're now closing that gap and making sure that they can, in fact, access those jobs. These are good paying jobs. These are middle class building jobs. And so we look forward to seeing more of it. The National Urban League is partnering with Comcast. We're also working with other companies, but today we're just talking about Comcast. And we want to, we're thrilled at all the partnerships, because it's really an opportunity to give back in a real way and a tangible way, to touch people. It's not just public policy. It's actually saying we want to give you hard skills, and then we want to pair it up so you can actually get a job. And, we've helped, nearly 800 employees in this program over the last couple of years. So we're thrilled with our Tech Jobs program and thrilled that Comcast supported us.
That's fantastic.
And I would just say, it's also, this program, the Tech Jobs program, is, it is, part and parcel of the same thing that we look at in the Latimer plan. And we have an entire section of the plan looking at workforce development and jobs, and that sort of springs out of what we call these closing the utilization gap, which is, how is it that we can use broadband better? How is it that by giving access to broadband on a more equitable basis, that we can go ahead and create new job opportunities for those who don't have them, so that we can close that job gap and allow people who to gain the skills that they need through workforce development training online, to have access to the jobs of the future, or to make new changes in their careers and move in a new direction, to find the jobs. And for a lot of people, just finding a job requires that you have broadband. Training for a job requires that you have broadband. And so, closing the digital divide is important for a lot of different reasons. But, the utilization element of the plan, really, takes squarely on this issue of how do we make sure that we have a population that is, ready to compete for and participate in jobs of the future, and broadband has to be part of that.
Absolutely. Although that's not what this session's about, I will say that I really appreciate the deep dive into making sure that as we recognize that we're in a battle or war for the soul of this country, or the souls of our cities, we cannot win this war with 70 million plus of our soldiers in the barracks.
That's
That
right.
so many people have been carved out of the American economy for decisions they finished before they finished puberty, and in ways in which we can get everyone back into the American economy that sustains communities all across the board is so important. So
Yeah,
but
we
thank
want the Kavanaugh treatment. We
uh,
wanted second chances. Second chances. And here's the other thing. You said it. I said it rather. You didn't. So the other thing is, I mean, just so you know, in our urban jobs program, we are targeting people who are long-term unemployed,
yeah,
and unemployed, because I think that's really important. We're actually going where the need is. To Smitty's point about and yours about going where people need it most and where we can measure. And so there's a real benefit here, a tangible benefit. We are helping people who otherwise might be working at some wonderful company out there, but is not a highly technical field and is not an entry to the middle class.
no, absolutely. So thank you for your work. I think it's so important to the future of this country and its competitiveness. You both touched on broadband adoption, and I want to chat a little bit about the Congress's COVID-19 relief bill included about 3.2 billion to help low-income Americans pay for broadband service, and that's based on that, the FCC officially established the emergency broadband benefit program. I guess this is in your wheelhouse, Smitty. It's going to provide discounts of up to $50 a month or $75 in tribal lands for broadband service for low-income households. Also includes a one-time discount of up to $100 for a laptop, a desktop, computer, or tablet purchase from certain providers. How's the Urban League working to help get the word out about this program, and maybe what mayors can do to help constituents sign up for the program?
Well, first of all, we're all holding our breath to see when it's going to be, released. It hasn't been released yet. I think we're thinking maybe not this week, next week, whatever. But whenever it's there, trust and believe. Urban League has already been in contact with the FCC. We're already offering our
When,
assistance
when,
to
a,
try.
when a black woman says trust and believe, you better be ready. So.
Better trust
I
and believe.
know my mother was being called. Sorry, I dropped the veil, I guess, a
I
little bit.
love it. I
But
love it.
I went to Harvard Law School. I can do whatever, right? At this point, say whatever I want. But what I would say is that we're very focused on engaging with them in terms of deploying this program and making sure everyone knows about it and really pushing them to be aggressive. From what I heard and from what I've seen and for what they've shared, they are being aggressive in their plans in terms of the rollout, and making sure people know about it. But I will say this, it is so important that we get this right. Because I've already heard folks saying, oh, it's not going to be, no one's going to use it. And we have to see what happens here before we can make, greater commitments. We have to get this right. We have to make sure that everyone who wants to access the emergency broadband benefit can, that they know about it. If you are at all interested in a greater investment, we got to show we can handle this investment.
Yeah. And I would just say to that, Joy's 100% right. This is of critical importance. The reason why it's an emergency broadband benefit is because we're in the middle of an emergency. People need access to broadband, and so the money needs to get out and needs to get into the right hands. And NUL, I know, will be right there, working hand in hand, helping to tie, the FCC to the communities at the local level, and working with mayors to do it. I think you mentioned a point about the importance of broadband adoption. And I really want to sort of focus on that for a second because it is so important. A lot of attention, a lot of energy gets invested in talking about broadband deployment, talking about how is it that we can build these networks out in largely in rural areas, but how can we build new networks? How can we spend a lot of money in building newer networks? And there are billions of dollars that are going towards building new networks, and that's a very important thing. The Urban League supports it. The Latimer plan emphasizes the importance of universal broadband availability and access, but it avails you not much if you have a lightning fast fiber network outside your door and you can't afford it. And so that adoption issue is key because the biggest barrier to broadband adoption isn't whether or not you have a network that's there for you to use. It's whether or not you can actually afford it. And this is a particularly significant problem in communities of color and in urban areas, where frequently you do have very, very strong networks with very good speeds, but you have a population that can't afford it. And so the emergency broadband benefit exists to solve a problem that is acute and short in duration. And for that reason, it's a short-term program. But what we think about at the Urban League, and we've been spending a lot of time putting together proposals for in the Latimer plan, is how can we go ahead and solve the long-term problem for broadband affordability for the populations that cannot afford it? And that is millions of Americans. I mean, right now, our numbers show that about 93 million Americans don't subscribe to broadband. That's a lot of people. Of the people who don't subscribe to broadband, and parsing the data, looking at the census data from the American Community Survey, we looked at it and we saw that about between 69 and 78 million Americans aren't subscribing for reasons other than the fact that there's not a broadband network, so what we're talking about is people who, for the most part, are not adopting because, and this is the single biggest reason, because they don't have the money to afford broadband. And so you have to have some sort of subsidy to go along with your broadband deployment program, to go along with the introduction of new competition. You have to have something that goes beyond that focuses on getting the absolute have-nots who cannot afford to and will not be able to afford to at just about any price point. And so, I think we offer a number of proposals in the plan to leverage existing programs, and leverage existing resources, and we also boldly call upon Congress to invest in making sure that people can afford it by putting more money into programs for a long-term benefit. So, that's what I mentioned.
No.
Broadband is indoor plumbing and electricity.
It's 21st century infrastructure.
That's right.
Is essential, and that's so the point you both just made. 3.2 billion sounds like a lot of money when it does finally start getting out of the door, but a lot of folks expect the emergency broadband benefit to run about 8 months. So I know that we, the African American Mayors Association, along with the National Urban League, recently signed on the letter to Congress calling for a permanent low-income broadband benefits, and obviously with great programs like Comcast Internet Essentials already in the marketplace in states like New York, requiring providers to offer low-income broadband programs. I guess it's easy for all of us to understand why this low-income broadband benefit is important for the long term, because once the money starts getting out the door, we expect it's going to expire fairly soon.
Can I say something though on that?
Absolutely.
Don't make any assumptions though about it. I want to tell you that that I've been hearing some betting against it and thinking that it won't be as successful. So I, like you, would assume like it's going to fly out the door. It's going to, it's going to go in the places that we expect it to go and where it's most needed. I think we have to make sure. I think we have to make sure, we have to do the work. And so I'm calling on all of you wonderful mayors who are best suited to make sure, to also make sure that your communities know about this benefit and that are using it, and that you are, especially the communities, targeting your outreach to the communities where it is most needed, perhaps even more than the federal government. So I want to just offer that admonishment.
Well, I know. Please, Smitty.
No. I was just going to say to touch on Joy's point. So there are existing broadband subsidy programs like the Lifeline program. Right, the Lifeline program. 90% of the Lifeline dollars go towards mobile. We propose reforms to the program and expansion of the program to help target in-home as well, which we think is the most critical part of the digital divide. But to talk about sort of how important it is to make sure that people are aware, that people know that the resource exists, that people are able to connect to it. If you look at the Lifeline program, you're looking at a program that has a subscribership of about 8 million people, but almost 30 million eligible to subscribe. Now, that is woefully undersubscribed. In some ways it works because unfortunately it's also woefully underfunded. And so if everyone who could subscribe to it did subscribe to it, it would crash the system. But to the point, there are programs that exist right now. Even taking a look at our host Comcast, right? Comcast Internet Essentials is a fantastic program. Offers broadband at a very low price for low income users, and yet I believe it's only about 57% of those that would be eligible to subscribe to it. So that's 43% that aren't subscribing to a service that would allow them to receive broadband for about $10 a month. So, actually getting people connected is a different thing from making sure that the resource that they need to connect is there. And we need the mayors, and we need the community leaders, and we need people all around the country sort of focused on that. In addition to expanding the programs, in addition to creating better programs, which are absolutely essential, in addition to making sure these programs are funded, we also have to get people connected.
So what I hear Joy and Smitty telling Steve and all the other mayors on here is that the future is subjective. I mean, that if in fact you have a desired future state for your community that really reeks of equity and inclusion, you gotta go make it happen. I mean, you gotta do the old school grassroots work and getting people not only educated on what's available, but obviously directing people throughout your community to take advantage of this. It's rare, and maybe a moment of just encouragement. It's rare that we actually have windows to discuss this. Usually mayors are sitting around, and we're always wide open, just thinking about what we can do, the process of ideation and innovation and everything else. You go through that, but usually oftentimes I should say, depending on where you are, in a period of scarcity, we're not there. So now we have resources. We've got to be very intentional about how we connect these dots in a way that has long-term benefits for posterity.
That's right. And measuring it.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because without it, it just won't happen. I mean, it just won't happen. I think the data shows us that. I'd love to have any more thoughts you have about obviously there are a number of different hurdles and challenges that help us get to a place of true digital equity. But I think continue to humanize the discussion around a $2 trillion infrastructure plan, broadband being a significant piece of it. And I think that might be maybe the only universal opinion that's come out of the pandemic is in fact that broadband access to the information superhighway, as it was called many moons ago, maybe when we started our careers, is now sacrosanct, a part of American infrastructure. Well, that's no longer debatable. If in fact we're going to be not only, if we're not going to thrive, but at least survive, we all have to have access to it. What else might we be missing beyond broadband deployment to also ensure that we continue to create more equitable communities? Anything else?
Can I add one thing? So last week, the Urban League and some of our sister organizations across different ethnicities planned an event on infrastructure priorities for communities of color. And it was really fantastic. I wish that you all could have been invited. We got to make sure your staff are on next time. But one of the things that came out when we looked at Asian American communities and Latinx communities is really the need for greater language inclusion. And so, as African Americans, but perhaps we don't think about that as much, but there are wholesale communities who really just we think our situation is bad. They really just don't have access. And even in the Trump administration, there were some benefits at the beginning of COVID that did not even have Spanish translation. And so, as we do this work and as the administration seeks to deploy the Urban League, we care about urban communities, African Americans, but plus. We want to make sure that we're also being an ally to communities who also need to make sure that they have translation services and that they can access benefits. And so I would be remiss to be on a call with the mayors and not mention that. And within the Asian American community, we're talking about a lot of different languages. So finding out a way that we can reach those communities and not leave them behind, I think is incredibly important.
No, absolutely.
Yeah. And I'd like to second that and add one more thing. But we have an entire section of the Latimer Plan that is focused on civic engagement and focused on ways that governments at the national level, at the state level, and the local level, and in cities can improve the way that their constituents use broadband. And one of those is to recognize that oftentimes our government websites and our online government resources are the absolute last things to get updated online, or the websites that are frequently the cloggiest and the least user friendly. It's a nature of
they're terrible.
And particularly for populations that depend on disproportionately depend on mobile devices to access the internet. I mean, now one of the things that we're trying to solve and trying to close the digital divide, and one of the things we're trying to solve with the Latimer Plan is helping get in-home broadband in every home. But for low-income populations and for communities of color, our phones are frequently our principal ways of getting access to online resources. And many of these online resources for local governments and for state governments, national governments are not mobile friendly. And so I tried to sign up for my parents through an online website for vaccinations using my phone, and it was absolutely impossible. Now, I had the good fortune of having several other siblings, because I come from a big family, all working on their laptops to do it, and we all happened to be, lucky enough to be connected, and so we were able to get the vaccination appointments. But if it had been just on our phones and that was the only way, wouldn't have happened. And that right there is a life or death type of issue. Yeah. So making sure that our local websites, that our local web resources are accessible for everybody, and mobilely accessible until we get to that wonderful point in time when we have in-home broadband for everyone, is absolutely important. The last thing I'll say is to go back and reiterate a point that we made earlier, but I just want to emphasize again. Broadband deployment infrastructure is absolutely important, and we're excited and we're supportive of it. But if you can't afford what's there, it's not going to help you much. And for communities of color, not just African-American communities, but communities of color, and particularly communities of color in urban areas that you mayors out there, are working with and that are your constituents, the biggest impediment for those communities is affordability. And so as we see tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars of infrastructure spending, about to be used, sent out the door, you have to be right there pressing to make sure that as part of that, what we're talking about is the affordability question, so that it can actually do some good to the people that really, really need it. And those are people in your community. If it all goes to rural areas, or if it all goes to communities where affordability is not a challenge, then we're going to be leaving tens of millions of Americans on the sidelines. And really, the largest group of unconnected in this country are those who are unconnected because they're not adopting, and because they can't afford it. And so, we've got proposals in the Latimer Plan. We'll have other opportunities to talk about exactly how to do that. How to update Lifeline, how to expand it, how to create sustainable benefits and subsidies. But that has to be a big part of what you mayors are asking everyone for, and calling people and making sure that people are held accountable.
I think it's amazing how consistent over the course of several generations of the message of the National Urban League has been, quite frankly. I mean, just as you summed it up, over 111 years working across demographic lines, making sure again that population that so often in political discourse gets left out is protected. Those in our cities and our metropolitan areas that oftentimes may not have the outside voice and political constituency that you might seek to achieve. So both of you in your last two comments summarize that very well. I know we're going to wrap this session up. I would be remiss if I didn't thank both of you. the two of you have blazed amazing trails and very short careers, I might add. And I can only wait and see where God's going to order your steps in the future. You're going to do continue to do amazing things. I'd be very remiss if I didn't thank my brother, entrepreneur, lawyer, professor, legislator, mayor, president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, CEO of the National Urban League, Mark Morale, for his continued leadership. Mark's a mentor and continue to guide us. So I want to thank him for his leadership. Thank both of you for what you're doing. Thank Comcast for supporting the African American Mayors Association, not just in the session, but again, Tony and you and the team from our very inception. We got a lot of important point in history. We can get it done. So Smitty, Joy, thank you again.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
All right. God bless y'all. Take care.